Hello and welcome to Your Business, Your Wealth. My name is Paul Adams, co-host of this show, as well as CEO and founder of Sound Financial Group. But it's just going to be you and me today. Corey couldn't join us mainly because of some things that went sideways in my world the last couple of days. Now, given what we're going to talk about today, this idea of being grateful right before Thanksgiving and the idea of cultivating contentment, and using that as a practice to be able to set up your planning for 2022 or any year. And the reason Corey isn't with us today is because my family and I just, over the last week, we've been moving my mom, my family, my father-in-law all onto the same property. But things went a little sideways yesterday with the move. When Corey and I were supposed to record that morning, I didn't get to bed until a little later than 3 a.m., all because the movers had understaffed and undermanned, if you will, this particular move. And one, I'm eternally grateful for this great partner in Corey Shepard, both on the podcast and behind the scenes that you guys don't see. But the other thing that just hit me like a ton of bricks is when we're grateful for things, there is a way that being grateful can give us space, can allow us to relax, can put us in a position that it's not all as bad as it might seem. And that's all absolutely true. But what we don't often think about is to pause when we're recognizing what we're grateful for in our life, and then think through in our career and business planning, how do I get more of that thing that I'm grateful for, that thing that I'm thankful for? Because so often we might say something like, I am thankful for a loving spouse who, keeps control of the household and helps with kids with school and some of those things. So it's wonderful. But then the pause would be, wait, how do I make sure that that continues? What do I need to do to pour into my spouse to have more of that to continue? So here's what we're going to talk about today. And this is going to be a precursor to the next podcast, which will be Corey and I, or in another week or two, Corey and I talking about business planning for 2022. So let's talk about what it means to be grateful for something versus what we refer to as cultivating contentment. Now, being grateful for something is wonderful. As we talked about a minute ago, if you pause long enough to just say, here's what I'm grateful for, it's very difficult to be upset with certain circumstances. But I know as you listen to this, some of you may have just gone through something really terrible. You might be going through something really terrible right now as you listen to this. And so I want to start with something that, at least a practice I have, to always level set and make sure that I feel grateful. And that is just winding the clock back. You see, I am so dearly and deeply in love with this country. And I think that there's some incredible things that have occurred in this country over the last 200 years. And those things have also progressed across the face of our planet over the last 200 years. So anytime I'm in a spot, or if I have a friend, a family member who has got themselves locked up that things might be real bad today for whatever the circumstances are that are affecting them, I think about, what if I was just born 200 years ago? And as you listen to this, what if you were born 200 years ago? Think about the level of technology we had. Now, one of the things that's a little bit of a pain, while we moved homes, my studio is still at the old house. So I had a 45-minute drive to be able to come in and record this episode. I don't get to stay here and work today. I have to run back a 40-minute drive to the new house to be able to stick around with sick kids all day because my wife's taking our one healthy child to homeschool assembly while I've got two at home with pneumonia. But if I roll the clock back, like in the midst of that, if you're upset and bothered by those circumstances, all I have to do is roll the clock back 200 years and go, wait a second. My children, who are in no real threat of long-term damage or death from pneumonia, I would have felt I might have gone into mourning just knowing they were this sick, because 200 years ago there was nothing we could do. 200 years ago, the trip that I made down here to the studio to make this recording, I don't know, might have taken 10 hours all day in the freezing cold, uphill both ways. Like, you kind of get a sense of it, that it doesn't matter. Your race, your creed, your beliefs, your sexual preference, whatever you've got going on. And I've challenged a lot of people on this. And if you have a different thought or something in the comments, put it below. I would contend there is no situation of the way you might want to run your life that is better 200 years ago than today. In fact, just the environment was killing people wholesale 200 years ago. Meanwhile, I get in my car to make this, what would have been arduous journey, and I just flip on the heated seats, flip on the heater, and enjoy a nice freshly brewed cup of coffee while I drive down here. So that creates a level set of like, I am so blessed. I am lucky. I am in a situation where I got to be born in a time that had me be an adult in this age. It's incredible. And so that's the pause to first notice what I can be grateful for, even if there's very little I could be grateful for. We took somebody from 200 years ago, dropped them in society today, they would think they died and went to heaven. Now, they might think some things are pretty weird about our society today, but by the same token, they would, like, if you said, hey, we're just going to give you $40,000 a year. You could be the richest person on the planet 200 years ago. We'll give you $40,000 a year in today's America. They would rather take that deal, especially because they could build from there. So there's our level set. That's initial gratefulness. But now, how do you think about that for the things you might want to garner for the future? Well, one thing I would encourage is you're listening to this and you think of some of the things you're grateful for. Maybe some of the things I shared triggered a few that are occurring to you that you could be grateful for. And what I would say is just jot them down somewhere. Open your phone, put them in Notepad. If you need to pause this podcast so you can dictate it because you're driving. But as those things occur to you, jot down a few of them. And what we're going to talk about is what you can do to organize your planning, to make sure you're taking care of your personal life first. So make sure you're capturing those this week. And then, what does it mean to cultivate contentment? So gratefulness is when you kind of march through your life and you naturally begin, if you notice what you're grateful for, you will notice more of it. That reticular activator part of our brain, the same part of your brain that when you first see no cars of a particular model or color, then you go buy one, or you're considering buying one, you see that car everywhere. Well, that's not the environment changing, that's your ability to notice certain things. So just pausing and being grateful for the smallest things actually equips your brain to better recognize those things. So that's the amazing thing about these gratefulness practices is they actually train our brain to watch for what we are grateful for, and therefore things that we can find pleasant in our lives. Cultivating contentment is different. Whereas gratefulness is noticing things as we march through our life and going back on our timeline and going, oh, I like that thing, I like that thing, I like that thing. This is different. Cultivating contentment is pausing and saying to yourself, wait, what could I be satisfied with? Like minimally. What is a good enough house? Satisfied. What is good enough healthcare, food, all of that? What does that whole situation look like? And saying so in advance, saying, I can see that I could be satisfied with a home that looks like this. It's probably less home than you have now. If we had a home that looked like this, if we had vacations that looked like this, and you start working through, I would be happy and honored to have an incredible community at my church. Like each of those things, we're saying we would be satisfied with those things. But then what naturally happens, because we're doing that in advance, because maybe we're doing something as simple as saying, here's what I'd like the next 6 months of my life to look like. Here's what I want a year to look like. Here's what I want 2 years, 3 years, 5 years to look like, aside from any of the finances, y'all. This is just saying, working out this many times a week, I would find satisfying. Reading and studying, educating myself, doing this, I can be content with. Because it's so easy to just be driven, to just go after the aims that you're after. And a kind of a silly example, in driving over this morning, there's a little place on a highway I drive on, a little single lane highway to get here, where the cars are merging in. And one of the things I thought to myself is I'd already thought through this trip this morning. And I wasn't in a particular rush. I knew my timelines. And so somebody pulls up, and you could tell that the way they came up the on-ramp is they're really thinking they're going to have to make some space and squeeze in. And I just backed off, probably gave the person 3 car lengths to be able to merge over. Why could I do that? Because I, ahead of taking that trip, had already thought through what would satisfy me about the trip. And getting ahead of this white truck that I let in was not one of the things that I said I needed to do, was I needed to get there before the white truck. But see, if we don't have an aim, if we haven't first said I want to cultivate contentment, then the reason I might have boxed out that white truck is because I just want to do better. That's what goes through my mind. I need to be a little bit faster. I need to be a little bit better. I need to get there in a bigger hurry. Or something as simple as in that moment of quiet competition with 2 people in line, you just want to be a little bit ahead. I got here first. That's the part where we miss out on a lot of great things in life, is that we haven't said in advance what would make us content. You see, by thinking through something as simple as thinking through this drive this morning, which I know in the midst of life, a drive to the office is small, but because I was clear on what made me happy, I was happy because I had this stuff that made me happy on that drive already. I smoked a cigar this morning on that drive, a sip of coffee, had a great cup of coffee for the drive. And so that was my contentment. I had planned for it. I had made sure those things were in the vehicle. And by making sure those things were there, the outside circumstances of heavy traffic and waiting in a long line, which, as all of you know, I waited in a long line in a ton of traffic. And when I got to the front, there was nothing. I expected there would be an 18-wheeler that had exploded, and no, none of those things. It's just like a little fog is why everybody was held up. And all of those things could even frustrate you. Like, why in the world did they not just keep driving the same speed through the fog? We all would have gotten there quicker. You see how by not cultivating contentment, things can upset us that have nothing to do with them getting in the way of our aims in the future that we want to create. In part because with contentment, we're peeling back all of the things that are not necessary. When the artist, Michelangelo, was talked to about David, and they were asking him, what did you do to create David? He said, I started with a block of marble and I chipped away everything that wasn't David. Now, I think a large part for us cultivating contentment is just the reflection. That's why we encourage people, write about it. Because you start to see all the things that we might pursue in life that if we are pausing in our quiet moments, either by ourselves or with our spouse, we find out very quickly that a lot of things that can create agitation or worry on a daily basis don't actually have much to do with our happiness. Don't have that much to do with what we would say in our quiet moments would really make us happy. And then think about how different this is. Now, is the driven person maybe feeling, I have been this guy, feeling really important, constantly answering emails and text messages, and I got to take this quick phone call and I'll be right back. And I was that person. And what I realized in reflecting is that handling all of those things was be driven to a single aim. It could have been income, notoriety, importance, but it wasn't like I sat down, reflected, and wrote all that out and said, I want to be looked at as really important, and so I'm going to mistreat people and walk away from social circumstances on my phone. That wasn't one of my aims. I just had a singular aim around money, and the solution of how much was enough was more. That might be the case for many of you out there. In fact, it's a good question to ask yourself. And it creates a little bit of a disruptor against this cultural common sense, this way that people do things, the way that we're lied to every day by the media. Like, do you think you need to buy a new car to be happy? No. They are intentionally creating circumstances with so much information coming in at us all the time that they can convince us, they can hypnotize us into thinking that we will be satisfied if we buy their thing. So here's what I would ask all of you today, and a little bit of take home, if you will, to be able to think through for your future finances. And that is, how much is enough? That question, as John Dewey would say, a question well put is half solved. A problem well put is half solved. Is that in this case, we just pause like, how much is enough income? Well, just asking that question, if your answer right now is more than what I have, that's a good place to pause. Now, that doesn't mean that if you do the math and you're like, oh my gosh, $400,000 is more than enough for me and my family. I can save now, put away money for the future. We have a great lifestyle, all of that. That's great. That doesn't mean you can't shoot the lights out and go make $1 million a year. But it does mean you travel on your way to $1 million a year of income by looking around at the things that are really important to you, the things that you said would cultivate your contentment, the things that you said would make you happy floating off in the future. And those are more than likely going to be non-financial things. Some of them could be possessions. But I think you'll find that if you do this exercise, there's a lot of life that we give away or surrender simply because we didn't take the time up front to say what would actually satisfy us. That's cultivating contentment. And by cultivating contentment, a lot of life is a lot easier to deal with. The last 20 months of COVID could be a lot easier to deal with because we have the ability to pause and say, there are a lot of things that maybe I can't do right now, but those are not the core things that make me happy. Maybe I can't go to a restaurant, but I realize the thing that makes me really happy about a restaurant is interesting food and good friends. Well, I can get together with some good friends and we can make some interesting food. We don't need a restaurant open for that. That's the key, is getting down to what really makes you happy in the things that have happened over the last year, over the last 2 years. And in all likelihood, if you really pause and do this reflection, you will find it's not some of the things you would have thought immediately. And so as you guys all go out today, my encouragement would be, it's going to be super easy as soon as this podcast is done or this video is done, to just walk off and get into your next thing immediately. And what I want to encourage you to do is just pause. If this is on YouTube that you're watching, go down and comment of one thing that you noticed you're grateful for last year, in the last 20 months, in the last 5 years, whatever it is. Start to identify what you're grateful for and how you can cultivate contentment. We love hearing from you guys on these, and we're going to build those things into perhaps how you could build your 2022 planning for career, for life, for family, for finances in a way that cares for you being able to cultivate contentment and better be able to identify the things that actually make you happy versus the media and advertisers constantly pounding down on us, trying to convince us and hypnotize us into thinking that what they sell us is what's going to bring us happiness, as opposed to what is going to bring us happiness. So those things most aligned with what's important to you, and it's within your power to have more of that show up by noticing it and being grateful, letting that reticular activator begin to notice what more you could be grateful for, and last but not least, building a strategy for the future where you're writing down, here's what a good life looks like to me. Here's what a good life looks like to me and my spouse. Because it's amazing that when you focus on creating a good life, there's a lot of bad out there, but it's a lot harder to see if you got to look past your good life first. So with that, I hope you guys have a great week. Corey's going to be back with us in the coming week. And as always, from everybody at Sound Financial Group, and I know from Corey, we hope that this episode has been a contribution to you being able to design and build a good life.